So the question, if I have it correctly, is about whether it's okay to have sex with someone who's not your spouse in Christian moral thinking. And I think on a number of occasions, again, Scripture is quite clear that Christian sexual ethics, and this is what people say, well, Christians, they're anti-sex. No, actually, they're very pro-sex within marriage, within heterosexual marriage. And so you've got a lot of language in 1 Corinthians 6 and 7, specifically where Paul's addressing, sexual immorality and fornication. And I think we have to say, we really have to do some gymnastics to the text to get around that as saying it's not talking about relationships outside of a monogamous marriage. That's clearly what Paul's talking about, that if you identify with Christ, then your body matters, and when you have union with a lot of people, that is less than his ideal. And I think that comes through on a number of, where Paul says, when you unite yourself to a prostitute in 1 Corinthians 7, he says, don't you know that you're uniting yourself with her and not experiencing union with Christ himself? So you say, a kind of clear mandate that's not something we're to do. And I think Christians, I've said this earlier this morning, Christian sexual ethics are always going to be different than non-Christian sexual ethics. And so we shouldn't be surprised. We have non-Christian friends and we say, well, we don't believe in kind of trying it out before you get married. They say, well, that's crazy. But it comes back to recognizing that my body is not my own. That my body is a gift from God, that I belong to God. My body's an instrument, and so I want to use it within the boundaries that he's given. And so again, I look 1 Thessalonians 4, the same idea comes up about sexual immorality. But going back then, I think the second part of the question is, do you have to, experiment before you commit to somebody? And the problem with that, if you say that's your mentality going into marriage, that's ultimately a very sexual or selfish view of sex. To say, I'm going to try out my partner to make sure she's good enough to meet my needs. Say, that is not the right view of sex, because then that person is just an instrument for your pleasure. Rather, sex is a gift from God that's really good at binding us together. That's why God gives it, that we're to experience two in one flesh, that sex is really good at that. And that's the problem nobody seems to get around. It's actually very good at creating human bonds. And that's why it's so painful when we do have a lot of partners, that it doesn't end well. So that's what I would say to that. If your view is to say, I really like this person, but I just don't know if she's going to please me. Say, really want to question your motive there. And if you play that game to say, well, you just, any person that's going to marry you is going to fall prey to a comparison, which is not the way you want to go into a marriage. Rather, you want to say, I love you, I'm committed to you. Sex is a good gift within marriage to bind us together so that we can live out the gospel.